I'm Lola.
And I'm Mamuna. Together, we've a combined 35 years of experience within the tech scene in North America and Europe.
We talk about the highs, the lows, the WTFs of navigating the technology industry and answer your questions about navigating tech careers.
This is Lost in Tech.
I think our regular viewers will have noticed it in the last few episodes, maybe last two. I'm not in my usual place. And
you're in your now usual.
Girls, well,
partial. It's okay.
I am in my belongings are in a container making their way across the world stage. So we shall make do with the random spotlight and the differentiated sound and the lack of background. And it's so funny being a tech person and having all of your toys taken away from you, and you just got the basics. And let me even just be humble, because my basics still include noise cancelling headphones. But still, it does not include my fancy podcast mic and my fancy light and my proper setup and everything else. So, for our regular viewers, we're in appreciating our in between state, and it is what it is until it isn't, and so we shall keep it going.
This is Lola bringing in MVP of life. The full product has not been built.
No, but we're still making it work. We're still launching.
Making it work. We've launched it.
The quality is still there.
Yes. It's just everything she says will resonate. Don't judge.
Don't judge the rapper.
Have not.
Exactly. What is that? What does that current mean? We listen, but we don't judge.
We don't judge. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So here we are.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I have stains on my sweater that I realized from my children. So I'm trying to block them.
No one saw it.
So nobody can judge me. But doing well. The year is fast moving.
Yeah.
It's been a long January. But
as always, we're on the 56th day of January today.
I saw someone say we're entering now the 7th week of January. I was like, it feels like it. It's a long month. It always
feels like the longest month of the year. Although in my case, because I've been off work, it actually doesn't feel very long at all.
Oh.
It feels like it's gone quite quick. But again, I've been off work for moving country reasons, and there's a lot happening. And so time speeds up in that space. But yeah, I'm actually quite grateful that January feels like a long month at this point in time. Usually I'm grateful it feels long because I have needed it, but at the same time, it's gone really quickly. And I'm back to work next week. And you look back and you're like, oh, I've had 4.5 weeks off work. What did I do? I did a lot, but it's had me reflecting on, when do you know that you need a break? Because we've talked before about, there's obviously burnout, and a lot of people don't even realize they're in burnout, but the energy changes and shifts, and you get this tension. And I definitely felt I was close to burnout. There's a lot that happened last year that was pushing me. But I probably wouldn't have taken a month off if I wasn't moving countries.
So what's interesting is moving and off aren't necessarily like time off or a break.
They're not. But what it has meant, for example, is I've spent a lot less time on a screen.
Yeah.
So number one, I have had, as a tech worker, somebody who spends 99% of my working time working remotely in front of a screen.
Yep.
That time, even on my phone, the screen time on my actual mobile has gone down massively over this month. My step counts, I have been, honestly, one thing I've done well, exercise. In where we've moved to, we walk our daughter to school instead of drive. Lovely. The gym is next to her school. I joined the gym and I've got a personal trainer there. And so in this month, I probably done more exercise hours and movement than I did in the previous 3 months before
Oof.
moving. I've spent more time outside. I
Yeah.
have gotten some vitamin D in my skin. And so, where I was fully reliant on supplements, I've probably
Yeah.
taken less supplements, but not felt like the lethargy
Yeah.
that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had a lot to do, but I've had to acknowledge the benefit of changing the dynamics of what I had to do every day, from
Yeah.
screen time, like super intense
Lots of
meetings,
screen time.
to IRL, sunshine
Experience.
outside,
Life.
experiences, and just
Yeah.
being more physically present in your environment.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't had longer than a 2-week break since I gave birth to my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking 7 years of
Mm-hmm.
working without more than 2 weeks off. And even those 2 weeks off, maybe the odd one was like a no devices, no contacts,
Yeah.
no smartphones. A lot of the time you are still connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was the longest period of not professionally working that I've had in quite a while. And honestly, it was definitely needed. And I think it's something we should all be mindful of, is when you're, even if it's not a case of I feel like I need a holiday, it's
Yeah.
just actually saying, when was the last time?
I reset.
Yeah, just that reset. And
Turning off
also,
your laptop, and they're like, when was the last time you restarted your laptop? And you're like,
dude,
I don't
every time
remember.
I've put it on to record or to catch up on something, it takes a hot minute. I've just discovered that the battery is no longer charging because I haven't been here in a minute, and I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
look, this number is not going up; it's coming down, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
plugged in to an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
So don't know what's going on there. I think it might be broken, but hey, I don't care. Right
It's all right.
now,
It's fine. It's fine.
it's fine. So yeah,
I think that's a really solid point. I think one of the things I actually speak to my parents a lot about is
Mm.
um, like delaying activities till your retirement, you know?
Mm.
So it's like, I would take a trip of a lifetime, after I retire. I'm going to save this money
Yeah,
for after I retire. And I'm like, we get to the point of retirement, right? But it's like,
yeah,
why delay life
yeah,
to that point? And so you bring up a really good point in that, you know, as you are living life, as you are working every day, staring in front of computer screens, talking to people, taking on the mental load of decisions, context shifting, all the things that take away from your
yeah,
memory,
yeah,
you want to give yourself time to recoup. And it's almost natural
absolutely.
where you don't have to have a vacation. It's just, I need to take some time. And sometimes it is longer than the 2 weeks where you are spending maybe 4 days acclimating
Yeah,
to being off. And
because you
then
need time
yeah,
to
turn off.
decompress before rest begins, and
Yeah.
then you have to kick it off again. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole
And
thing.
then you start to like, oh my gosh, 3 more days until I have to go back to work. 2 more days. And then the whole thing, your brain already starts to take like, okay, I need to make sure to-do list.
Yeah,
One thing I'd always try to do, is this always? I think it's an always statement, at least for the past couple of jobs, is take like 2 to 3 months off between jobs.
yeah. See, I haven't done that.
Yeah. And I just work it into the conversation to say, hey, if you want me to come fresh and ready for the role, this is when I'm going to start. And I haven't had any pushback on that.
No, because most people wouldn't. This is the key, and I think this is the message and the takeaway I want to leave with people is you actually have to have real presence of mind to even ask for that.
Yeah.
Because I think back to when I started my current job. I basically finished my previous one before Christmas, and I started this one immediately
I
after.
remember you started so fast.
Right. When I started the job before that, I moved countries again. I
Mm.
finished a job on a Friday. I moved countries on a Tuesday,
Mm.
and 2 Mondays, like a week and then a Monday later, I had started work, and that was in the middle of a pandemic. There were no gaps, so I'd
No.
taken like a 2-week gap, and I'd moved countries, and then we were in a lockdown, and we were straight back at work. And so there is something about a presence of mind. You're so excited about the next thing, or you're so into what you're doing. And I think even founders probably have this. It's like you think you can't take the time, or you don't need the time. But when you think back, when was the last time you had that time?
That's the only time you get as an employed adult. That's the only time you actually
it's between jobs.
Exactly. And so I'm like very selfish. I don't even ask. I just tell people, hey, this is what I'm doing.
Free. Yeah.
Yeah. And just leave it there, because that's all you have. Like, that's it.
It's so funny though, because so what I recognize, I'm getting ready to come back to work next week. And there are a few things that I find myself just naturally thinking about, solutions to problems that I was stuck on before I left, that I'm like, oh, do you know what? I might just do this. And I don't know that the clarity or the simplicity of the solution would have been accessible to me if I hadn't had the break. That's one big lesson. The other big lesson is, especially when you're a senior leader and stuff, you're always like, oh, my team, and there's so many things, and I got to get this handover ready. And before I left, I literally had like a bunch of handover documents that I hadn't done before the Christmas break started. And then I was kind of working and taking meetings through Christmas. Nothing has gone wrong.
As it won't.
As it won't. And it's the mantra that I say to myself, because unless you are an emergency room physician or a neurosurgeon or somebody who literally has lives in your hands, it is quite likely that they will survive without you. They will make different decisions.
They will survive without you.
100%. Everybody is dispensable. Yes. And, I remember my team was like, oh, we'll make it work for you. And they were very protective. And I was very much like, I'm off. You can text me, you can call me, but that means it's really serious. And like, so they were like, oh, we don't want to do that. I've been checking in. There's a few of them that I'm friends with. So there's like WhatsApp messages and stuff, and everyone's fine. Nothing happened. It's probably going to be that I'll start back at work and a bunch of people will be like, oh, hey, I didn't even realize you had been off.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like a blip. So I want to give that to our listeners that, you know what? Take a break, a longer break, not a 5-day. Yeah. Take a longer break.
I think in that same vein, for like mental, I don't even know if I'd say mental health, but before you
working parent alarm.
But it's interesting, right? Because I've hit burnout before, and once you hit it, you're done. Like there's no, okay, I'm going to take the weekend, and no, you're in it. And the journey out of it is a long one. It took me several months. I feel like I was more of almost 8 months. But if you feel you are approaching it, do yourself a favor, because in that state of where you could be, your employer is not going to give you grace. They're not going to say, oh, you look burned out.
No.
Oh, let us help you. They're going to say, hey, you're underperforming. And that's only going to add to whatever stress you're feeling.
Yeah, the downward pull.
Exactly. So, be selfish. If you need time, take the time, see what benefits your company offers, and take the time you need, because no one's going to tell you that you look burned out or tired or whatever it may be, or you need to take an extended period of time off. Like, take the time.
And it's also those things that you can't account for. It's I don't have the holiday, but you probably, and I know the US is very different, but will you have the sick time if you get to that burnout stage, or God forbid, something more physically and dangerous, like the stress levels, and it affects you. And it's like, you really have to be, there's a reason, there's an intentional need. And actually, this is a lesson that tech could take from finance. I know in finance, a lot of finance companies like traders, hedge funds, significant businesses, they make their key people take a mandatory 2-week consecutive break every year. So whatever's happened, however much holiday you have, they force you to take 2 consecutive weeks in order to minimize the stress or the risk of mistakes or all of that stuff that potentially does impact the work.
No, that makes sense.
I
I love
personally
that.
think that the soundtrack is a great addition to. These are our realities, Mamuna.
The
Like, if we weren't
reality.
recording, you would be working through this. You would
Yes.
be
Oh yeah.
continuing
Easy.
to be
Easy.
productive with the background
Yep.
noise. I don't see why we have
Yep.
to. We
Yep.
got to
It's just
carry on through. It's just there. It's
carry
ambient.
on through. Carry on through. I feel like it's just life. Yesterday I took my singing child to work,
Yep.
and as like we were talking through a meeting, and we're slow switching topics here, but we were talking to a
Yeah.
meeting with one of my groups, and I was like in a serious like teaching moment with the team while holding this child, just like babbling. But we were actually talking about an interesting topic, which is
Yeah.
speaking to getting to the root of no, or I think
Mm.
you had said like the path of yes.
Yes.
And the team was trying to share with me why things hadn't progressed in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And what it came to was that they were working with another team. The other team just said no. And they're like, okay, I'm like, we can't go further. And I'm like, okay, well, what did you do after you got to the no? Like, okay, well, that's where we took it. I'm like, what were your follow-up
After
questions?
that,
You know, what did you
yeah.
ask? Yeah, like what else did you ask? And what it came to is that they were not technically comfortable with what the responses
Mm.
could potentially be. And so that is
Mm-hmm.
where they stopped because they felt
Yeah.
they could not go back and forth. And what I was trying to communicate at that time was you have to understand what someone is saying no to so you can help
Mm-hmm.
them get to the yes, right?
Yes.
It just
100%. Was it because, so I guess question, were they talking about engineers, product people? Was it like business knows, or like what was the
it
context?
was engineering, and it was
Mm,
like a technical engineering side with architects and some
yeah.
engineers.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you guys in the States have this as well, but we have this kind of like physical joke in the UK where like you are talking to a builder or something and you're like, oh, how much is it going to cost? And they're like, they give you this big thing and you just expect the worst. And it's like, it's been in every comedy sketch. It's like, and you take your car to the garage and they just be like, that sharp
Oh,
and take a breath. And I always have that physical image in my mind when talking to an engineering team that is saying no. It is exactly the same thing. It's just like,
really?
we're going to default into this. It's not possible.
Yeah. I found that in developing relationships with the engineers I work closely with, I tend not to get that as much because I know that that's not where I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
And so I think that their first like the first thing they say is like, okay, like it's really interesting. Like, let me
Hmm.
talk you through my thoughts here. And
Yeah.
we've gotten to the point where we're sort of just sharing ideas on how it could potentially work, where they're raising the concerns of like where blockers could be. And
Yeah.
so it's almost retraining it to not be as no, or like,
Yeah.
that's big.
Well, it's also, I think there's an art of not asking zero sum questions.
Yes.
So like if I walk into a situation and let's say it's with an engineer and I'm like, can I have feature XYZ specifically by this date? That's a zero sum question. The answer is either going to be yes, you can, or no, you can't. And from that point, it's much harder to then negotiate and navigate. It may seem like more fluffy, but if you walked in and said, hey, here's our metrics, we need to be in this point by this point, or we need to make this shift in an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And here are the levers. What can we
Mm-hmm.
do? And it
Yeah.
completely reframes the conversation, as you say, because then instead of just saying yes or no to something that's zero sum, they're participating in saying, like, what can we make possible? Like, how realistic is it that we can aim for this outcome? Or what would we do instead to try and minimize whatever negative scenario we're in? It puts them in the driving seat with you.
I think there's also an interesting reaction engineers or other folks have. I won't say engineers only, but folks may
Yeah, no,
have
it's
when you come
most teams. Yeah.
prescriptively to the
Yes.
conversation with
Yeah.
okay, here's the thing, here's how it works, here's the date it needs to be done by. Because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, what do you need me for?
There's no discussion here. I'm just being
Yeah.
told. Yeah.
They're immediately going to try to like, I don't know if that's possible. They're going to try to pick it apart because they're like, well, you've already thought through all the details here. Clearly,
Yeah.
you have to be missing things because, you're not the technical person or you're not the expert.
Yeah.
So I think it's a way that
Well,
you have to come.
it's also a risk mitigation, actually, because sometimes when you are overly specific in a domain where you don't have all the context, the
Mhm.
person you're talking to might assume you do have all the context, and they won't
Right.
necessarily step up and provide you with additional information or help you manage the risks that are apparent because well, you walked in with all the answers. So I assumed you knew what you were doing. And so now I'm
Right.
going to walk away. So yeah, I see what you mean. And I think part of what maybe we have naturally evolved how to
Mhm.
do is to keep opening a conversation up, even when it sounds like there's going to be like a close down. It's like, well, how do we nudge this? How do we, what if scenario this? How do we try and pull something out such that at the end of it, everybody feels good about where we might be headed, as opposed to we got told no, we're going to walk out the door and um, leave it at. But I guess a question for you then is, isn't there a time for no?
Oh, yeah. I
Mm,
agree. Like, I think there's definitely a time for no. And I think it's good to surface whatever those no's are. I think
yeah.
understanding when you are the person coming for like to provide context, or you're the person coming with a question or trying to build requirements, whatever it is, you want to pull those no's out. So I think the important thing is understanding specifically what part of your ask is the no,
Yeah.
right? And so you can now solution for that part specifically. So I think that's the thing I like to understand. But I, they're all there are most always going to be those. There should be no's. There should be questions to help you
Mm-hmm.
think through your asks. Like, is this
Mm-hmm.
what you're asking for? Do you understand the
Mm-hmm.
implications of your ask? This should be a no based on how the business makes decisions,
Mm-hmm.
the business values, whatever it is. So I would expect that, but
Mm,
I think there's an art to how you ask questions. I think there's an art to
100%.
how you approach people for
Yeah.
information. You all want them to feel included. Like this is a decision we're all making together, even though it may not always be the case. You want them to feel like they've had buy-in or
Yeah.
they have some skin in the game for the quality of the thing that you're all producing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that point of skin in the game is actually key in tech jobs as well, in tech environments where, it's like when they say we're collaborating, what does collaboration actually mean other than this random fluffy word that you're supposed to put on your CV and Chat GPT generates for you? It ultimately is being able to say, okay, we have consulted the team. We have ways of making sure that the various points of expertise have been included. And the outcome we've got is the best outcome we can have based on all the knowledge that all the right people have. And
Right.
your ability to get to that version of an outcome effectively, whether it's a full yes or um, what should I say, like a compromise or a negotiated yes, that that becomes performance.
Yeah. And getting to that is a skill, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Because you have people who drop the ball, who they're like the accountable party for pulling everybody in, but maybe they're like,
Yeah,
oh, well, these people have the opinions or they want to have the conversation. So I just
yeah,
gave it to them. And it's like, well, you have to
yeah,
help guide the conversation, ask and
yeah,
prompt with the right questions.
yeah.
So it's
There's a
good.
layer that I always add to that as well, which is this concept of like constructive tensions. Because I think
Yep.
again, we talked a bit about the megalomaniac founder who's like, I want, go build me, and like their role is to ask for the impossible. And you can exist in a culture where it's like, oh, they're just going to ask for crazy things and everyone's going to break their necks and blah, blah, blah. I've always tried to reframe some of that, or within my own teams anyway, in the environments I've worked in, not just the kind of me mouthing off about other people's stuff, but as it is, somebody has to ask the hard question. And then other people have to be like, what? What are you saying? How is that possible? We're going to have to push back a little bit. And then there's probably a third or a fourth element, which is, well, we don't have the time or we don't have the money. And kind of like a suspension bridge. you need all of those things to be pushing against each other to get the optimal tension for the thing that you build to be super strong, right? If you have limitless money, limitless time,
Never
and
happened.
all of the room,
Triangle.
nothing
Yeah.
exactly, it's that
Yeah.
triangle. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
gets done, or if it gets done badly, and
Yep.
it's never, the outcome is never received. For example, a real world example. I don't know this like 100%, but one of the most frustrating things in Toronto for Torontonians is that there's been like this subway extension that has been in the works for 25 years. And where I used to live, there's a
Actually doing
station,
construction on it.
full on construction. You can see the trains, you can see the train lines. There are train
Okay.
stations above ground. It's taken 25 years to get there, and they
Mm-hmm.
still don't have a date for this train service to open. And what I heard is, for whatever reason, under whichever government, there are no penalties for late bills.
No
So,
penalties. So
so
wow.
the companies that have been contracted can keep finding issues.
Oh wow.
They can keep having safety problems that they need to fix. And so the project rolls on and rolls on and rolls on. That's an example of limitless money. Because if you don't put consequences in for extending the cost of
Yep.
something, guess
Yep.
what's going to happen? It's going to keep bloating in price. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about being like doing crazy things in 5 minutes. This week, we're not doing, everyday commentary, but we have an AI that's emerged out of China
Yeah.
and tanked the stock market that has spent almost no money relative to, was it OpenAI spent 8 years in
OpenAI.
stealth?
Yes.
Whatever Google's been doing for the last 20 years with, DeepMind and all of these
Mm-hmm.
other things. And, sometimes a new kid jumps on the back of everyone else and is able to do things smarter. But the reality is they had a lot more constraints and they still did something outstanding in shorter time with less money. So I definitely think like no's help you get to a better point,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to know how to negotiate through that. You have to kind of work
Yeah.
that tension to the right point so that it still produces something amazing at the end of it. Because without it,
Differentiated.
you're wasting everybody's time.
Yes. I'm very curious.
Mm-hmm.
Really quickly. Have you played with DeepSeek yet?
I have not. I have not. Your child wants to, though.
Hold on. I know. I'm very curious. Sorry, hold on. Let me give her something to play with.
Yeah.
You want your rabbit? Rabbit. Let me tuck this back in. I'm so nervous to put it on my phone, but I so badly
What is
want
making you nervous to put it on your phone?
the unknowns, right? Like with OpenAI, I was able to check some boxes, say like I don't want my information training the model. I know what I know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I feel comfortable with what I know to be able to
Mm-hmm.
interact with GPT or even Gemini and Claude so far.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't give it my social or anything like that, but I feel okay giving it what I've given it. But DeepSeek, I don't know anything, and I don't think anyone knows much just yet.
But
But it's the number one
yes and no.
app. Uh-huh.
Yes and no. So on the one hand, it's in the
Mm-hmm.
App Store.
It's number one product.
It's number one on both Google and Apple.
Mm-hmm.
It has managed to pass the bar for legal requirements in both of those ecosystems, right? So having
Yeah.
recently published apps into that, they will read your T's and C's.
Yeah.
And they will come at you for stuff that they don't like that they see. So as it relates to privacy laws, as it relates to the same bar that I would expect ChatGPT or Claude or Anthropic to have, OpenAI, these companies to have met, this product has highly likely met that same bar to be an internationally available product on your phone and your device. I have no more concerns about it than I do any of the other AI
Okay.
LLMs. I believe they all share the same characteristics, which is they're going to become our overlords and take over. The only reason I haven't tried it yet is just because I'm still on my like tech diet month, right? So I'm going to come back to it next week. What I find fascinating about it, though, is again this I'm really I'm really interested by this fact that we do seem to have these zero sum perceptions of the world, even when everything that we're doing is expanding, right? So we kind of do like, oh, Google was supposed to kill Microsoft. It never did. X is going to kill Facebook, or Threads is going to kill X, or
Perplexity
Blue
is going to
Sky
kill
is going to,
Google.
right. It's like, oh, Claude's going to kill ChatGPT. And it's like,
ChatGPT.
these things don't happen. These zero sum outcomes don't happen. But the fear of it seems to be so repetitive, this pattern.
I think that's more of like isn't that more of just like a talking point than actual like expected reality? Don't you feel?
Well, I mean, there is a reality when DeepSeek being so popular took $1 trillion
off the market,
off the stock market. Like that's a very real world consequence. Is it took money out of people's pockets, people's pension pots to a certain extent. You know? So I don't understand it because, well, no, I do understand it. Like disruption is real.
Like psychology,
and there are definitely a lot of games where there can only be a handful of winners. You can't have like the tons of winners that you see today.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're still so early in this game,
right?
That it does surprise me. So many unknowns that it does surprise me how the markets responded to an improvement. Like we're used to this idea of step changes. The internet got faster exponentially in a very short time frame when broadband technology showed up. And maybe it had a similar shock to the stock market, and I was too young at that time to see it. But I would have expected that we anticipate the next LLM to be so much better and just these improvements. I think the issue is actually one of good old-fashioned Cold War and maybe just a tinge of xenophobic racism, which is if DeepSeek was a European company or an American company, it would have been seen maybe more positively.
Maybe because I feel like I was rocking her and she got mad. I feel like part of what we saw was not so much that, but I almost think that I lost my train of thought. Hold on.
But what we saw with was it xenophobic, racist?
I almost think it's like a hype cycle of sorts. You know, like we know.
Oh, baby girl.
Hey. Is this a rabbit? Did your rabbit fall? Like, fuck this rabbit. Oh, what about this? You want to hold that? Okay, we have 2 minutes. Okay. So part of me thinks that it's almost like this hype cycle. And I think the media plays into it, investors play into it. But I think a lot of people have felt that NVIDIA, like they had assumptions about how things operate. And then someone breaks that assumption. Like they break their reality. And I think people are very not fickle, like they're not fully informed. So when things happen, like these like black swan events or whatever you want to call them, they react without saying, okay, like, hey, let me think logically about like, does this make sense? You know, like, could this happen? It is just an immediate like, oh my gosh, you know, everyone else is saying, oh my gosh, I'm gonna say, oh my gosh, too. Versus it's like steady hand. And I think that's almost just how the market works more generally. So I'm not surprised the market took a dive. Everything's probably just gonna go back to the way it was. And people are like, gonna forget this. And then in a couple of months or whatever, it's gonna happen again and again and again. But I think it's like humanity, like humans, like it's just human.
It is, I think it's innately human to like see something being like a massive improvement and to fear it, but also be like, what the heck? Can't believe that. At the same time, I think for me personally, when I see these innovations, they're really exciting for me because it kind of shows that we're kind of in this position where, like, again, that energy of can I do something with less? There's always a chance for the little guy in this world. It's like as much as we can see these big oligarch style tech companies with massive influence, and they just seem to be like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They all get freaked out when somebody with less money, less resources is able to compete. And what that does for me is it builds confidence in this idea that you do not always have to be working for the big guy. You do not always have to be working for the so-called popular or the winner of the show, because in this world of tech, the one thing we all protect and the one thing that I personally stay motivated by is there's always a chance that somebody else is going to show up and disrupt. At the same time, as it's step change improvements. It's like you're going to try and move things forward. You're going to try and change the idea about how something is done. And I am naive in that I expect that markets have gotten used to that by now.
No.
But instead, they have very short-term memories.
Yeah, I don't think they ever will.
Sure.
Did you... Before, last thing I want to say quickly is, like, did you see yesterday, what do you think about, like, the small guys, the little guys? The Boom supersonic plane yesterday?
No.
They were the first private company to build a plane that hit supersonic speed. Small team.
Okay.
Okay. I think she's had her max.
Okay. This is amazing. I'm going to look this
right?
up. And they broke the sound barrier. Oh, fascinating. Okay, let's include that in the show notes.
All right.
Okay.
Trying to keep her off cam, but have her next to me.
Strategic placement.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we wrap up this episode? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, take breaks as you need them. Life is short. Like, advocate for yourself. Like, reflect on what you need. And take them. Like, you never want to wait till end of life to say, I wish I had.
Regret the things you did, not the things you didn't do.
I like that. I like that. And then we talked a bit about the no's, or getting to the path of yes. What's our takeaway from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's knowing how to ask the question. And to tie it to our last conversation, it's being able to say, okay, how do we get this outcome? As opposed to, can you do this exact specific thing that I have decided is the thing you want to do? And if you're in doubt about whether or not that strategy works, I'm pretty certain that if DeepSeek's founder had gone out with the mindset of, how do I raise as much money as OpenAI or Anthropic in order to build an LLM, the answer would have been no, because OpenAI and Anthropic have done it. Instead, that founder reframed the question and said, is it possible to do this given the resources that we have? And if it was possible, how might we do it? And 2 years later, here they are breaking every kind of record and scaring the crap out of the biggest players in the field. So the art of reframing the question, and you said it actually, the path to yes.
Yeah.
That's the sweet spot where tech really comes into its own, that I think motivates me for sure.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the exciting part. And then you're going to come next week with a rundown on DeepSeek and your experience playing around with it. Okay.
That'll be my first task, is going to be downloading this app and starting to give it some of my to-dos.
Yes.
Let's see,
I need to get over my fear of it. I'm so deeply curious. I think I'm just going to do it.
Interrogate that fear and ask yourself, because before you finish installing it, you've got to sign the T's and C's. So in the same way, you just need to read the same T's and C's.
Yeah. Okay. I'll interrogate it, but I also think I'm just going to do it.
I think the thing that I am more scared of, but this is also the fearful inevitability of these things, is what I have heard about the DeepSeek is that it is that much more intelligent.
I know.
And it hallucinates less often. So it is more, it kind of is that step change towards the overlord state where they're going to take over, because it's clearly smarter than the other kids in the class. And when that's the case, you start forgetting that it's not a real person that you're talking to. Just happens to know you really well because you keep asking it all the questions about your life.
Yeah. Okay. And with that being said, folks.
With that being said, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining. We'll see y'all.
Always
and
good.
Thank you for allowing my child to cameo in the background.
We appreciate and we make space for working parents, because that's just real. Yeah.
It's real, y'all. It's real.
We've made this show for you, and we want to hear your stories. We have our combined 35 years experience in tech. We have an incredible bank of experts to call on. We are your safe space. So send us your tech challenges and we'll help you create some draft decisions through some real talk.
You've been listening to me, Mamuna Oladipo.
And me, Oyelayo-Pearson.
Edited and produced by me, Michael Bussa, with theme music by 031 Mash.
Email us at help@lostintechpodcast.com or DM us at lostintechpod.